In June of this year, News 4 learned of a young woman claiming to have been sexually assaulted, intimidated, and coerced by a Coffee County Sheriff's deputy. Her statement caught the attention of the FBI, ABI, and media. Well, since then, 5 other women have come forward, all arrested by the same officer at some point during the last decade. News 4's Skylar Zwick now with her special investigation of these allegations. Skylar?
That's right, Reg. Some women have provided us with signed affidavits and court testimony. Others drew floor plans of Deputy Tony Harrison's home, showing investigators at the local, state, and federal level where weapons, drug paraphernalia, and other items could be found. Now, to verify their claims, we requested Harrison's employment and disciplinary records from several agencies where he's accused of intimidating and sexually coercing women he arrested on drug charges. We began those requests in July and were either denied or our requests were never answered. So the question remains, did this deputy abuse the badge?
This particular deputy comes with an extensive history and reputation that's not good.
Officer Chris Davis first met Tony Harrison in the early 90s. Davis was working for the Enterprise Police. Harrison was a member of the Andalusia Department of Public Safety.
There's been other cases that I've been involved in where females were arrested, and you know, at some point in time they would say that he had either made a pass at them or offered them some type of deal on their case to be involved with him or have relations with him.
One alleged victim, we'll call her Jane, says Harrison arrested her more than 7 years ago in the Enterprise area.
You know, he just put it out on the table, you know, pretty well that we could work things out in other ways, and I told him to take me to jail.
Now, do you think that there's any way you misinterpreted that proposition?
No. There was no doubt what he was saying. I mean, he was looking me up and down like I was a piece of candy. No.
In this secluded parking lot by a child's baseball field is where one woman claims the alleged incidents occur. She says she was sexually coerced by Deputy Tony Harrison and that it escalated from there. This alleged victim then sat down with 2 independent investigators. The taped conversation that follows is her story. It was then submitted to the FBI and News 4.
The initial sexual contact between Tony and yourself.
Well, last night we introduced you to 2 women claiming to have been abused by a Coffee County Sheriff's deputy and a former co-worker who says the same officer has crossed the line. Well, tonight, Skylar continues to investigate these allegations. Sky?
Well, Reg, more than half a dozen women have made similar claims. Now, this is a case of he said, she said. All the evidence is circumstantial and testimony is hearsay at best. Each of these women, most of whom were afraid to speak to us on camera, has a checkered past with at least 1 arrest on her record. But still, trained investigators and the alleged victims all say this deputy has abused the badge. One alleged victim took her story to 2 independent investigators who submitted this tape to the FBI and News 4.
Now, you've drawn me a floor plan of Tony's house.
Yes.
About how many times have you been in Tony's house?
Several times, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 times.
She described this case that he has with all these different knives in them. He's really into knives, folding knives, fixed blade knives, and one of his hobbies off duty is to go to knife shows. I've seen this briefcase with all of his different Glocks, the different calibers and different models that he has. And so in her description of these things, you know, it's a direct description of what I know about Tony personally. And I just don't believe that there's any possible way for her to know these type details without having been exposed to them.
More than half a dozen women claim current Coffee County Deputy Tony Harrison supplied them with illegal drugs, cash, and clothes.
To keep her in a compliant mood or mode so that, you know, he could convince her to do things that he wanted to do sexually or you know, in other ways.
I've heard that all of that, and that he has had people that are on drugs stay with him and aiding and abetting pretty much. Had women stay with him while they were being hunted. And he supplied them with drugs and clothes and whatever else they wanted.
Trained investigators we spoke to on and off camera say they believe these alleged victims despite their checkered pasts.
During that interview on that day, I seen no sign of deception in regards to anything that she was saying or she was claiming had taken place.
But their opinions of Deputy Harrison are not quite as high.
To do the things that I know he's done and to be accused of the other things, you know, that he's alleged to have done, he's had his second chance, and it's over and done with. He doesn't deserve a third.
He deserves to go to prison.
And Reg, many of the law enforcement officers we spoke to on and off camera, a lot of them could not or would not go on camera, told us that Harrison was allowed to resign from his post in Andalusia and multiple other Wiregrass agencies when he was
We've
accused
introduced you to women claiming to have been sexually extorted by Coffee County Sheriff's Deputy Tony Harrison. News 4 was denied access to his employee records, but Skylar Zwick discovered Harrison admitted to at least one transgression. Skylar?
That's right, Reg. Deputy Harrison did admit to one inappropriate contact with a potential witness he had arrested. Like the others we spoke with, she has a criminal past and says that's why no one has ever taken any of these complaints seriously. But these stories caught the attention of the FBI and its Alabama counterpart. Both reviewed the allegations against Deputy Harrison and delivered their verdict to Coffee County Sheriff Dave Sutton. Tonight we sit down with Sheriff Sutton to find out if this deputy abused the badge.
These are criminals, these are ex-employees, disgruntled employees.
News 4 has discovered at least 6 women spanning more than a decade with similar stories of proposition, coercion, and intimidation, all afraid to speak openly on camera. One alleged victim took her story to 2 independent investigators who submitted this tape to the FBI and News 4.
He told me that if I ever told anybody anything, that he would deny it, even if he was on camera, that he'd deny it and that I had to deny it too.
Even his supervisors admit Tony Harrison did not follow the rules.
As far as informants and witnesses, we have an association policy. We are not to associate with them any which way, shape, or form.
How many times have you been at Tony's house?
Several times, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 times.
That protocol was broken by his own admittance. Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Tony Harrison sat in on our interview but refused to speak, his lawyer saying he had answered to these charges in court, leaving News 4 this message.
Apparently someone has indicated to you that he would do a sit-down interview with you, but upon advice from me, that's just not going to happen.
But through his supervisor, the deputy admitted to one single transgression involving a victim in our story.
We did have one of our officers, one of our investigators that was involved in a sexual contact with an individual that was a potential witness and not an informant. But it did occur. He openly admitted it to us, and we have taken sanctions against him for that.
He accepted a written punishment for violating department regulations.
We do not sanction it. That's why we did give him a letter of reprimand.
While some say that's not punishment enough and former co-workers say it's far from a first offense, the sheriff says this deputy's
All this week, News 4 has investigated claims of impropriety leveled against Coffee County Deputy Tony Harrison. Skylar joins us now with an update.
That's right, Reg. The sheriff issued a written reprimand after Harrison admitted to a transgression involving an alleged victim in our series. He called the claims allegations made by criminals and disgruntled employees. But after our first story aired, a female Wiregrass police officer came forward to, as she put it, lend credibility to other alleged victims. She says she was sexually assaulted by Tony Harrison and believes he has abused the badge.
Here I was, a young police officer and new to the department. So my first thought was that wasn't what I wanted to be my first thing known for in law enforcement. Was accusing another officer of raping me.
For 16 years, few knew of Nicole's story until our series aired.
They said the name, and as soon as they did, I remember I gasped, and I sat there for a second to make sure that I'd heard it right, or that it was the same person.
And she remained silent until now.
He was a drug investigator at the time.
2 to 3 months later, she says Harrison abused her trust.
One day he called and he wanted me to go and get something to eat or go somewhere with him, and I told him I wasn't able to do that.
Instead, she says he came to her home.
At that point, he didn't take no for an answer.
The following is her account of a friendly outing gone wrong.
We sat and talked for a little while. He began to kiss. At some point, he began to remove my clothing. I kept basically sliding back on the floor to get out from under him. The more I pushed back, the more he was on top of me, and eventually I was backed up to where my head was basically in the bottom shelf of a bookshelf that was on against the wall. So at that point, I couldn't go any further, and at that point, then he raped me.
Nicole says she mentioned the incident to a fellow officer and was met not with support, but with stories.
Started hearing a lot of things about Tony at that point, and kind of got criticized myself for even being around.